Greetings, my beautiful lovelies. It's Emmy. How are you? It's great to see you and welcome back. Today, we're going to be making a chocolate cake that has been making the rounds, and what's special about it is that it has a crunchy top as you bite into a fluffy chocolate cake. It sounds delicious. I'm dying to know what these textures and flavors taste like, so we're going to be making it today. So it's called the Lazy Cat Cake because it's super easy to make, and it was created by a Kuwaiti chef named Ahmed Al-Zamil, and it looks pretty simple, but then I was reading different recipes. There's no original recipes, but there are lots of variations, and it doesn't actually look that easy. I think what's easy about it is that if you use a pre-made cake, then over the cake you pour chocolate milk, and then on top of that you add a cream cheese whipped topping, and then you add a layer of chocolate ganache, and then on top of that some crunchy chocolate coated cereal. So that's actually a lot of steps in my opinion for a cake that's supposed to be lazy. I guess lazy in the sense if you're not baking the cake, but today I'm going to be making my own variation on the Lazy Cat Cake. I love a good chocolate cake, so I'm going to make that from scratch, and then I'm going to just have a ganache layer and the cereal layer. So omitting some of the steps on the layers, but adding more energy to the cake, because in my opinion, I really love a good chocolate cake, and I have the perfect recipe for chocolate cake. It's my favorite chocolate cake. Whenever I make chocolate cupcakes, people always ask about this recipe, and I always share it because it's so stinking easy. It's originally called the 6-minute chocolate cake, or it can be called the crazy cake. This particular recipe comes from a Better Homes and Garden cookbook, but it's called a lot of things. It's called a crazy cake because it doesn't use any eggs to leaven the cake. You just use vinegar and baking soda, which sounds odd, but it makes the most beautiful cake. It is also very conveniently vegan, but what I love about it is that it comes together super quickly. That's why it's called the 6-minute chocolate cake. So enough yapping, let's go ahead and get started. So I first made this recipe back in 2009, and it's definitely the dirtiest page, or one of the dirtiest pages in my notebook. Here it is, the 6-minute chocolate cake. I always take a picture of this dirty page and text it to whoever's interested in making the cupcakes or the cake that I've brought to the party. I can't tell you how many people I've recommended it to and how many people love it because it's just so stinking easy. The original recipe calls for mixing the batter directly into the pan, so you don't even have to dirty up a bowl, but I like doing it in a bowl. So I've got a sifter here on top of my bowl, and now we're just gonna dump all the ingredients in. Unlike most recipes that I do when it comes to baking, I'm going to be using measuring cups because it's easy and it works. So 1.5 cups of flour, 1/3 cup of cocoa powder. Now that's the main reason why I'm choosing to sift it, because cocoa powder tends to clump. 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of sugar. Now I love this recipe because there's no creaming involved, no real order of operations. We're just dumping everything in. So easy. And we shake this. And this is the cake that I make the most for birthday parties because it's so easy, and I can whip it up really quickly, and I can make a homemade birthday cake. I usually just make a frosting to make it a little bit more fancy. When I don't have time to make a frosting, I add chocolate chips directly into the batter. Then I don't need a frosting or anything, just a little extra bit of sweetness. Perfect. Now to that, I add 1/2 cup of vegetable oil and 1 cup of water or cold coffee. Now I recommend the coffee version because to me it tastes chocolatier. If you don't have coffee available, cold coffee, I like using the instant stuff, instant coffee, and adding it to the water. Not necessary. Dump that in. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And then we just mix it together. So easy, right? And what I also love is you probably have most of these items, if not all of these items, in your pantry. You don't need any baking chocolate or anything that you have to make a trip to the grocery store for. The classic thing that I like to do is make these into muffins. So I just divide this into a muffin tin, and we have chocolate muffins. And then I add a little bit of, like I said, some chocolate chips to it, and you don't even need a frosting. Here's the ingredient that might sound a little unusual. We're gonna add 2 tablespoons of plain white vinegar. I've also used apple cider and it works fine too. This is going to react with the baking soda and it's going to leaven the cake. So we don't need to stir this too carefully because we don't want to work out all of those carbon dioxide bubbles, right? The recipe says that a few swirls of the bubbles is all right. That's our cake batter. Next I have, this is about a 7-inch baking pan. I'm using this one because I want to be able to push the cake out, but you can make these as muffins. If you want it to be a round cake, a 9-inch cake pan works great. You have a single layer. If you want multiple layers, then I recommend 2 6-inch pans and you get a little small celebratory cake. That's really nice because you can have layers, but we're gonna go with this 7-incher because this is a push pan and we can just push the cake out, which I think will be really nice once we put that cereal topping on. So place that back in there, liberally spray it. I'm going to set it on some parchment just in case if I had any leaks. And into the pan. Now into a preheated 375-degree oven, and this will probably take about 30 to 35 minutes. It will depend on the size of your cake pan. I would start checking it after 25 minutes and just use a toothpick, and once you pierce the cake and it comes out clean, you know your cake is done. So we are going to take the cake out and then we're going to allow it to cool before we move on to the ganache layer and the cereal topping. All right, lovelies, I will see you in a little bit. See ya. Alrighty, lovelies, I'm back with my baked cake. Here we are, and it is a thick one. Look, it rose super high, and because it was so thick, it took much longer than 25 minutes to bake. I believe I added an additional 15 minutes or so for the baking time, but again, that's why it's important to check it with a toothpick because the baking times will change depending on what size pan you bake with. So letting this cool, it's still a little bit warm. While it does that, let us work on our ganache. Now ganache sounds very fancy, but all it is equal parts cream, heavy cream, to chocolate. So I have a half a cup of cream in here. There's little chocolate bits, but I'm gonna place this in the microwave and warm it up for 30-45 seconds to get it warm, and then I'm gonna add my chocolate to it. So let's warm this up. And while that's heating up, I've got some chocolate that I've chopped up. I have a combination of milk and dark chocolate. Traditional ganache is usually made with a darker chocolate, but I like the combination of dark and milk. Well, I like dark in general, but my youngest likes milk, so we're striking a compromise. Typically, what I see is usually you add the hot cream to the chocolate, but I'm putting the chocolate into the hot cream. So this is 100 grams of chocolate to 100 grams of cream, and that works out to be about 3/4 of a cup of chocolate chopped and a half a cup of cream. So it's important to have the cream hot enough so that it melts the chocolate. Now I'm gonna let this rest just a bit more to make sure that all the chocolate is melted fully, and plus it'll make it a little less runny as it cools. Now the unique feature of this cake is its crunchy top, and we use cereal to make that happen. And today I'm going to be using Cocoa Puffs, classic cereal. I have not had this in a minute, and it looks like this, little balls of cereal. Airy, crunchy, corn base with a great cocoa flavor. Super cute. Now, I have 2 cups in here. I chose to use these because they're so uniform and aesthetically they're very pretty, and it's echoing the flavor of the cake, chocolate. Now I've seen other variations of this cake that use cornflakes, puffed rice cereal, also Cocoa Krispies. So depending on what you're going for or what you have a lot of options. So I've got 2 cups right in here. Now, I'm gonna stir my ganache again. And now it is velvety smooth. So look how smooth the ganache is. Isn't that gorgeous? all the chocolate is fully melted. So we're going to use this as a layer on our cake, but also we're going to put some on our cereal. A few tablespoons. Stir to coat. Look at that, glossy. So now that we've got this glossy finish, now we're going to add some unsweetened cocoa powder, kind of mattify things. Look like little truffle balls. Oh, I wish you could smell this. So chocolatey. Okay, so I added probably like 3 tablespoons of cocoa, and I'm just gonna let them kind of dry. Here's our beautiful cake. Now we're going to pour our ganache right on top. This is pretty runny. Probably should let it cool just a little bit more. Okay, lovelies. Let my ganache cool a little bit, and it's not quite as runny. Still very fluid, but not as runny. So that will help keep the ganache on the top of the cake. I don't mind a few drips. And I think I might add some drips on the sides later. Gonna distribute this over the top. Make sure everybody gets some. Now the original cake had you soak it with chocolate milk, which I could see if you had a store-bought cake or a dry cake and you want to add a little bit more flavor and moisture, but this cake is so good and I don't really like soggy cakes, so I'm not doing that. Now we're going to add our ganache coated cereal and dusted in cocoa powder. We're going to add those right on top of this. Oh, can you hear that? That's such a beautiful sound. I don't think you need as much cereal as I got. I think you only need about a cup. All right, let's disperse these a bit. And that ganache will help stick the cereal into place. They kind of look like garbanzo beans, don't they? Now, how do we get the cake out of the pan? Well, this is the beauty of the push pan. Look at this. Oh, are my balls gonna fall? That was a great sound. Gotta push the handle down first. There. Okay. That wasn't quite high enough though. Okay, here we go. Stay. Sounds like a gong. That actually looks pretty cute. Oh, except for the ones that want to go overboard. Kind of looks like dog food. What? I know, it does. Sometimes you gotta be real. Alrighty, my lovelies, let's finally give this chocolate crunch cake a taste. Now I have to say, after putting on the cereal, it looks a little bit like dog food. I don't know why. I think it's like the dusty quality of the cocoa powder. It might have looked better with just plain Cocoa Puffs rather than going to the effort of ganaching and then dusting it with cocoa powder. But I don't know, it still looks pretty cute, I think. Look how moist that crumb is. We got the layer of ganache and then our crunch on top. We got ganache and cereal. Here we go. Itadakimasu. That cake is excellent. Moist, fluffy, chocolatey, so good. You do not taste any of the vinegar, for those of you concerned, at all. The cereal adds a nice crunch. But as it sat on the ganache, it lost some of its crispness. Just a few minutes, really. So let's put some fresh cereal on. Let's put some naked Cocoa Puffs. And I've got some leftover ganache. And let's add that to the top. So I say, don't even bother dusting the balls. The cocoa powder adds a kind of velvety texture to everything and a additional punch of chocolate flavor, but it's a little bit bitter because it's unsweetened cocoa powder. If you're using Cocoa Puffs, I would say just put the plain Cocoa Puffs on top. They seem to be crunchier too. But it probably depends on the type of cereal you're using. If you're using cornflakes, I imagine them to be a little bit sturdier and perhaps they would retain more of their crunch. Now, if you don't go to the lengths to make a crunch cake, still make the chocolate cake. If you would like to gild the lily and make the ganache too, I don't think you'll be disappointed. But if that's more work than you like, just make the chocolate cake and add chocolate chips to the batter. You'll get wonderful chocolate cake or chocolate muffins. Crowd pleaser, easy. You have a dessert from start to finish, including mixing, in a half an hour. Would I make the chocolate crunch cake again? Probably not. Will I make the chocolate cake again? Definitely. On the regular. We make it all the time. It's our favorite. Since this batch of chocolate cake does not contain any chocolate chips, the ganache layer is welcome. It adds a little extra sweetness, a little extra chocolatey flavor. And then you've got the cereal on top, which is kind of a novel texture contrast to the cake, but it's also a little strange to me. Now, the original Lazy Cat cake recipe contains chocolate milk in the cake, and there's also a whipped cream cheese layer. So that's a lot additional moisture. So perhaps this wouldn't be as a dry thing because you've got all that moisture within the cake and then you've got the cereal on top. But as I've made it, it definitely is a novelty, but not really necessary. This chocolate cake on its own is pretty great. Although the ganache is nice. Alrighty, my lovelies, thanks as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you learned something. Please share this video with your friends, follow me on social media, like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye! Alrighty, now it's time to make dinner before I eat more cake. Man, chocolate cake is so good.